The character panel has a lot more options for things that you can do with type than your standard options bar. And that's the technical name for this bar across the top that changes depending on what you have selected. So I'm going to zoom in a bunch, and I'll use Command plus or Control plus, and I'll wheel up to the top. Ideally, I'd like to be at 100%, so View 100% or Command 1 on the Mac, Control 1 on Windows will get me to the best view. So once I have the product's text on my screen, I want to change some of the character settings. But before I jump in, I want to warn you about the way type is edited in Photoshop. This cursor is technically called an I-beam because it looks like the letter I. If you see a dotted line around it, it means Photoshop will create a new text area. So it built a layer 8, but I wanted to edit the word products. So I'll click this check mark to accept that and then trash layer 8. Yes, I really do want to delete it. When you go to edit text, it is a good idea to not aim for the beginning of the word, because you may miss, or the end of the word, again, because you may miss. If Photoshop is in the right spot, that dotted rectangle disappears, and I always aim for dead center. If there's an underline, I'm in text edit mode with the flashing cursor where I clicked. But I'll double click to select the word. 2 clicks always selects a word. And on your options bar, I could do things like go to vertical text or horizontal text. I've got my font, style, size, my anti-aliasing, my alignment and color, and special effects to warp or bend text or apply distortion. But the last icon on the options bar is to toggle the character and paragraph panels. Here I could see many of the options that were already up, but there are more choices. I'm on Myriad Pro Regular, which is what I want, size 15, and leading is the technical term between 2 lines. And you may wonder why it's not called line spacing. It actually came from the days of metal type, where they would put a piece of lead in between the 2 lines of type. Our nav bar or navigation bar is only going to have 1 line, so we don't need to adjust any leading. Now this is one of my favorite areas. Normally, when text isn't selected, you'll see the word metrics, meaning the letter spacing, which is technically called kerning, the space between P and R and O, is using the kerning pairs or the spacing built by the font vendor. If I double-click on the word products, Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign have their own optical kerning engine, which if I choose it, gives me better, more readable text and more even spacing between every letter. Our brain doesn't actually read sentences or words, it reads word patterns or sentence patterns. So better spacing makes it more readable. So now I've set it to optical, and I do that for everything I create. However, if this is a web or device mockup, we don't really have optical kerning on the web or on devices, so metrics may be a more accurate predictor. If I'm doing proofs for the client and I want it easier to read and I know it will change when it goes to the web, I'll choose optical. Bottom line, optical is my favorite. I also want to space out the characters a little bit more, so that is what tracking will do. Tracking is white space between selected text. So I will track this out by choosing a positive number, like 10 or 25. I think I'm happy with 25. I can also create some really unique text effects by scaling the text either vertically or horizontally. And just for fun, instead of typing in a number, I could move over this T and use a scrubby slider. So I could slide up, making the word products taller, or down, making it shorter. And I think I want to land at about 95%, so I'll type in 95. If I hit Tab, it jumps over to vertical scale, and maybe I'll do 80%, kind of simulating a reduced look to the font. Then it jumped down to baseline shift, and baseline shift is best shown with one character selected. If for some reason you wanted to do something fancy, like move this S above or below the line, that's when baseline shift is handy. Again, I can use the icons in the character panel to slide it up or down. A lot of corporate logos have small manipulations like this on the characters, so it's not just a flat line of type. When I'm finished, I'll set that back to 0, and I'll double-click to select the whole word. I can choose a different color here, but I'm happy with the color that it is, so I'll click OK. And then you've got buttons for a fake bold, which can be applied on the web, but is a little bit more dangerous on the print documents, so more so in InDesign and Illustrator. Typically in Photoshop, most stuff lands as an image anyway, so fake bold or faux bold is safe. Faux italic is also something that will work well on the web or devices, but I recommend if you're in the print world to choose a true bold or italic so you know you have a bold or italic version of that font installed in your system so it doesn't cause printing issues. We can also do all caps, and if I make this letter P capital and double-click the word again, you could see small caps. So it makes smaller characters that look uppercase for the bottom of the words. I actually do want all caps. And to illustrate the next two icons, I'll type the number 2, so product squared. I'll highlight the number 2 and hit superscript, so it makes it smaller and shifts it up on the line, or subscript, smaller and below the line. And clicking the icon again will turn it off. I'll delete that number 2, double-click the word one last time, and I could do underline or strike through. Now, a lot of people ask me what ligatures are, and I'm going to hit a space and turn off all caps and type the word office. A ligature is where these two F's run together and the I isn't dotted. And that's what this symbol means. If I turn off ligatures, the F, F, and I are independent, and the I gets its dot back. I'm going to delete that. I could also type something like 1/2, highlight that, and set it to a fraction. Now, only certain typefaces, specifically OpenType or Pro fonts, they're higher-end OpenType. OpenType is a word for fully cross-platform fonts. Only higher-end fonts will have these available. If I had fractions on, I could also do ordinals. So for example, 1st Street, 2nd Street. But I don't want the fraction, so I'll turn it off. And I'll delete that 1/2. And the last option you have is if you're doing foreign language versions of your web mockup or device mockup, you could change your language. I could see if German has the word products. So I'll choose German, the 2006 reform. And my spell check, if I did edit, check spelling, would check in that language, and that's how products is spelled in German. So I'm going to hit done, change this back to English and English USA, but there is a full English Canadian or UK for Europe dictionary. I'll choose English USA. And this has been a pretty deep overview of the character panel in Photoshop.